You know, dear ones, there are moments in life when you discover that the child you raised, the person you sacrificed everything for, sees you as nothing more than an obstacle to their wealth. I'm 76 years old, and I never imagined I'd be standing in my own home on moving day, watching my son and his wife pack up my belongings, listening to her whisper with that cruel smile, "You're dying in a studio apartment." They were preparing to take ownership of the house I'd lived in for 48 years. The house where I'd raised my children, where I'd buried my husband's ashes in the garden, where I'd celebrated every birthday and holiday. They were just taking it, selling it out from under me, expecting me to go quietly into some tiny apartment and wait to die. But here's what I want you to think about. What would you do if your own child betrayed you like this? If the person you'd given life to decided your life no longer mattered? If you discovered too late that you'd been manipulated into signing away everything you owned? Would you accept it? Would you fight back? Would you have the strength to stand up for yourself when you're old and vulnerable, and everyone expects you to just be grateful for whatever scraps they give you? If you want to know what I did, how I turned the tables on my son and his greedy wife, and what was inside that attorney's file that changed everything, make sure you subscribe to this channel right now and hit that like button. Because this story is going to show you that underestimating an elderly woman is a dangerous mistake. And the plot twist at the end? Well, let's just say my son never saw it coming. And his wife's smile disappeared real quick when she realized what I'd actually done. It all started about a year before moving day, when my son Jeffrey came to visit with his wife Amanda. They sat me down at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped Jeffrey with his homework, where we'd had family dinners, where Richard and I had shared our morning coffee for 30 years. Jeffrey said, "Mom, we need to talk about this house. It's too much for you. The maintenance, the property taxes, the upkeep. You're getting older and it doesn't make sense for you to struggle with all this when you could sell it and live somewhere easier. Somewhere simpler." The way he said it, so reasonable, so concerned, I actually thought he cared. Actually thought my son was looking out for me. Oh, how wrong I was about his real intentions. When you get to be my age, there's this constant pressure from society, from family, from everyone to downsize your life, to make yourself smaller, to take up less space, to accept that your needs and wants matter less than they used to. I've been feeling that pressure for a while, feeling like maybe I was being selfish, holding on to this big house when I was just one person, when my children needed money, when I could live somewhere cheaper and leave them an inheritance. Richard had died 6 years before, and the house felt empty without him, felt too big sometimes, felt haunted by memories of what used to be. I'd struggled with the loneliness, struggled with the yard work and the repairs, struggled with feeling like I was fighting a losing battle against time and aging, and the inevitable decline that everyone kept reminding me was coming. Jeffrey knew all this, knew exactly how to exploit my insecurities. He'd been working on me for months, making little comments about how tired I looked, how the house was too much for someone your age, how I deserved to take it easy and not worry about property maintenance. Each comment was like a little chip in my armor, making me doubt myself, making me think maybe he was right, maybe I should sell, maybe it was time to let go. Amanda, his wife, she played her part too. Always so sweet to my face, always complimenting me, always saying things like, "You're such an inspiration, still managing this big house all alone." But there was something in her eyes, something calculating, something that made me uneasy even though I couldn't quite name it. She'd walk through my house touching things, looking at things, commenting on the value of the furniture, the antiques, the paintings Richard and I had collected. I should have seen it then. Should have recognized that she was cataloging my possessions, already planning what they'd keep and what they'd sell. The pressure built gradually, so gradually that I didn't even realize it was happening. Didn't realize I was being manipulated into making a decision that would benefit them far more than it would benefit me. By the time Jeffrey brought the real estate agent to the house, by the time he'd set up meetings with lawyers about transferring the deed, I'd already been worn down enough to think maybe this was the right choice. Maybe this was what good mothers did. Gave up their homes so their children could profit. Made themselves smaller so their children could have more. Jeffrey had shown me brochures for senior apartments. These nice-looking places with activities and community rooms and maintenance included. He talked about how much happier I'd be there, how I'd have friends, how I wouldn't be isolated. How it would be perfect for me. I'd actually gotten a little excited about it. Actually thought maybe this transition wouldn't be so bad. Maybe it would even be good for me to have a fresh start somewhere new. He'd taken me to visit a few places and they seemed fine. A little small maybe, but clean and safe and managed. Jeffrey kept saying, "This is where you'll be so much happier, Mom. Trust me." And I did trust him. Trusted my own son, who I'd raised to be honest and kind and caring. Who I'd taught to value family above everything. Who I'd sacrificed so much for. Working 2 jobs after Richard got sick to make sure Jeffrey and his sister could go to college. Giving up my own dreams so they could chase theirs. We went to the lawyer together, Jeffrey and Amanda and me. They presented me with papers to sign. Papers that would transfer the house into Jeffrey's name. With the agreement that he'd sell it and use the proceeds to secure me a place in one of those senior apartments. He'd explained it all so carefully, so patiently. Saying this was the best way to handle things. That this protected me. That this ensured I'd be taken care of. I'd signed because I believed him. Believed that my son had my best interests at heart. Believed that family meant something. Meant loyalty and love and protection. The lawyer had asked me several times if I understood what I was signing. If I was sure this was what I wanted. I'd said yes. Said yes because Jeffrey was nodding encouragingly. Because Amanda was smiling her sweet smile. Because I thought we were all on the same team. All working toward what was best for me. I remember feeling relieved afterward. Relieved that the decision was made. Relieved that I wouldn't have to struggle with the house anymore. Relieved that my son was taking care of everything. I'd actually thanked them. Actually hugged Jeffrey and told him how grateful I was to have such a caring son. He'd hugged me back and said, "Anything for you, Mom." And I'd believed every word. The first hint that something wasn't right came about 3 weeks after I'd signed the papers. I overheard Jeffrey and Amanda talking in my kitchen. They didn't know I was in the hallway. Didn't know I could hear them. Amanda was saying, "How much do you think we'll clear after the sale?" Jeffrey said, "At least 400,000. Maybe more if we get a bidding war." Amanda laughed. Actually laughed. "God, finally. We can pay off the house, get new cars, maybe take that trip to Europe we've been wanting." I felt my blood run cold. Felt this sick understanding wash over me that they weren't selling my house to help me. They were selling it to profit from it. To get their hands on my equity. To cash out on my life. I stepped into the kitchen then and they both jumped. Looked guilty for just a second before Jeffrey smiled and said, "Oh, hey, Mom. We were just talking about how excited we are for you to move into your new place." But I'd heard what I'd heard. Understood what I'd understood. I said, "What new place exactly?" There was this pause. This telling pause. Jeffrey said, "Well, we found this great studio apartment. Really affordable. In a nice area. You'll love it." I said, "Studio?" I thought we were looking at 1-bedroom apartments. Amanda actually rolled her eyes. "Those are too expensive. The money from the house needs to be managed responsibly. You don't need that much space anyway." I realized with dawning horror that they'd never intended to get me a nice place. They'd been planning to stick me in the cheapest option possible and pocket the rest. Over the next few months, as the house went up for sale and I watched strangers walk through my home, judging and commenting and touching Richard's things, I started paying closer attention to Jeffrey and Amanda's conversations. Started noticing how they talked about our money and our plans and never once mentioned what I wanted or needed. I realized I'd made a terrible mistake. Realized I'd been conned by my own child. But the papers were signed. The process was moving forward. And I felt helpless. Trapped. Unable to stop what I'd set in motion. Jeffrey had already picked out the studio apartment without me. Had already signed a lease in my name. Had already decided that this tiny 400 square foot space was sufficient for me to live out my remaining years. When he showed me pictures, I felt sick. Absolutely sick. Because it was basically a closet with a hot plate. Nothing like the comfortable 1-bedroom apartments he'd shown me before. When I protested, when I said this wasn't what we discussed, Amanda got this look on her face. This cold, cruel look. She said, "Beggars can't be choosers. You should be grateful Jeffrey is helping you at all. Most people your age end up in nursing homes." Moving day came, and I stood in my living room watching everything I owned being packed into boxes. Watching the life Richard and I built being dismantled piece by piece. Jeffrey barely looked at me. Was too busy directing the movers. Too busy discussing with Amanda which of my furniture they'd keep for themselves and which they'd sell. I felt invisible. Completely invisible. Like I'd already died and they were just sorting through my estate. Amanda walked past me carrying one of my photograph albums, my wedding album actually. I said, "Where are you taking that?" She said without even looking at me, "We're keeping the nice albums. You won't have room for all this stuff in your new place." She said new place with such disdain. Such contempt. Like the studio apartment was some kind of charity they were generously providing rather than the prison they were forcing me into. I wanted to scream. Wanted to cry. Wanted to fight. But I felt so defeated. So powerless. So completely trapped by decisions I'd made when I still trusted them. Then came the moment that changed everything. The moving truck was loaded. Jeffrey was signing the final sale papers with the real estate agent in the driveway. Amanda came up to me with this smile. This terrible, victorious smile. She leaned in close, so close I could smell her perfume. And she whispered, "Enjoy that studio apartment. It's where you'll be dying. Probably alone. Probably forgotten. While we live in our beautiful new house that we bought with your money. And there's nothing you can do about it. You already signed everything away, you stupid old woman." She actually patted my cheek. Actually had the audacity to pat my cheek like I was a child. Then she walked away laughing. I stood there shaking. Not with fear but with rage. With absolute fury. Because I'd been stupid. I'd been trusting. I'd been manipulated. But I wasn't completely helpless. Wasn't completely defeated. Because there was something they didn't know. Something I'd done weeks ago when I started to suspect their true intentions. Something that was about to turn their whole plan upside down. I didn't say anything to Amanda's cruel words. Didn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. Didn't let her know that her mask had slipped and I'd seen the monster underneath. Instead, I just smiled. Just gave her a small, calm smile. I said, "Thank you for your honesty, Amanda. It's clarifying." She looked confused. Looked unsure for just a second. But then Jeffrey called her name and she walked away. I was left standing in my empty house. My empty life. Except it wasn't quite as empty as they thought. You see, about 6 weeks before moving day, after I'd overheard that conversation in my kitchen, after I'd started to understand what was really happening, I'd done something that Jeffrey and Amanda never anticipated. Something that old people aren't supposed to be smart enough or tech-savvy enough to do. I'd gone to see a different lawyer. Not the one Jeffrey had taken me to, but an elder law attorney that my friend Margaret had recommended. I told him everything. Told him about the papers I'd signed. Told him about my suspicions. Told him what I'd overheard. And I'd asked him a simple question. Could I get my house back? The attorney, his name was Robert Chen. He'd looked through all the documents I'd brought. He'd been very quiet for a long time. Then he'd said, "Mrs. Patterson, did anyone explain to you that you were giving your son complete ownership of this house? Not just authorization to sell it on your behalf?" I'd said no. They'd told me it was a power of attorney for the sale, not a complete transfer of ownership. Robert had nodded. "That's elder financial abuse. That's fraud. And we can fight this. But we need to move carefully. We need to document everything. We need evidence of their true intentions." That's when I'd started my own investigation. That's when I'd started recording conversations, taking notes, keeping receipts, building a case. I'd been doing it quietly, secretly, playing the confused old lady while actually being 10 steps ahead. I of my son and his wife, standing in my empty house on moving day, with Amanda's words still ringing in my ears. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. I called Robert Chen. I said, "It's time." He said, "Are you sure?" I said, "Absolutely sure. They've shown their true colors. They've said things that prove their intent. And I'm not going to let them get away with this." Within 2 hours, while Jeffrey and Amanda were celebrating at a restaurant, toasting their good fortune with expensive wine they'd bought with my money, a sheriff's deputy showed up at that restaurant and served them both with legal papers. A lawsuit for elder financial abuse, fraud, undue influence and breach of fiduciary duty. And an emergency injunction freezing the sale of the house. Freezing access to the proceeds. Freezing everything. I wasn't at the studio apartment like they thought I was. I was at Robert Chen's office, sitting in a comfortable chair, drinking tea, and going over the evidence we'd compiled. The recordings. The documents. The testimony from the original lawyer about how Jeffrey had pressured him to rush the paperwork. The testimony from neighbors who'd witnessed Jeffrey and Amanda's treatment of me. The medical evaluation proving I was of sound mind. And the psychiatric evaluation showing I'd been manipulated and coerced. It was all there. All documented. All ready to present to a judge. The look on Jeffrey's face when he called me, when he'd gotten those legal papers, I didn't see it, but I could hear it in his voice. The shock. The anger. The disbelief. He was yelling. Actually yelling at me. What did you do? How could you do this? I'm your son. I said very calmly. Exactly. You're my son. And you betrayed me. You lied to me. You stole from me. And you expected me to just take it because I'm old. But I'm not senile. I'm not helpless. And I'm not going to let you destroy the life your father and I built. Then I hung up. Just hung up on him. And it felt good. Felt powerful. Felt like taking my life back. The legal battle was swift and brutal. Jeffrey tried everything. Tried to claim I was mentally incompetent. Tried to say I was being manipulated by my lawyer. Tried to paint himself as the victim. As the caring son who was just trying to help his difficult mother. But the evidence was overwhelming. My medical evaluations were clear. And the recordings I'd made. Especially the one where Amanda said I'd be dying alone in a studio apartment. That played a big role in the judge's decision. Amanda tried to deny she'd said it. Tried to claim I'd edited the recording. Tried to backtrack and say she'd been joking. But the audio was clear. Her voice was unmistakable. Her cruelty was undeniable. The judge looked at her with such disgust. Such contempt. He said, "This is one of the most egregious cases of elder abuse I've seen in my career. You didn't just steal from this woman. You psychologically tormented her. And you expected to get away with it because she was old and trusting." The judge ruled in my favor on every single count. Ruled that the transfer of property had been obtained through fraud and undue influence. Ruled that Jeffrey had breached his fiduciary duty. Ruled that I was entitled to recover not just the house, but damages for emotional distress. He ordered Jeffrey and Amanda to pay my legal fees, which were substantial. And he placed a judgment lien on their assets, which meant they couldn't sell anything or hide money until they paid what they owed me. The house sale was voided. The property was transferred back to my name, and I got to move back home. Back to the place where I'd lived with Richard. Where I'd raised my children. Where I'd planned to live out my days. Felt like winning. Felt like justice. Felt like proving that being old doesn't mean being powerless. Doesn't mean being a victim. Doesn't mean accepting whatever treatment your children decide to dish out. Jeffrey and Amanda lost everything. The money they'd already spent anticipating the house proceeds. The down payment they'd made on their dream house. The cars they'd leased. The vacation they'd booked. All of it came crashing down. They had to file for bankruptcy. Had to move into a small rental. Had to face the reality that their greed and cruelty had destroyed their own lives far more effectively than anything I could have done to them. The irony, the beautiful irony, was that they ended up in a situation much worse than the studio apartment they'd planned to stick me in. You know, sitting in my living room now, surrounded by the things Richard and I collected over a lifetime, sleeping in the bed we shared for 35 years, tending the garden where his ashes rest. I think about what this whole experience taught me about family and trust and the assumptions we make about unconditional love. The truth is, blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. Raising children doesn't guarantee they'll value you. Sacrifice doesn't guarantee gratitude. Sometimes the people who hurt you most are the ones you die for. I'd spent my whole life believing that being a good mother meant putting my children first. Meant sacrificing my needs for theirs. Meant making myself smaller so they could be bigger. That conditioning, that lifetime of self-sacrifice, that's what Jeffrey counted on. That's what made me vulnerable. It almost worked. Almost destroyed me. It would have worked if I hadn't finally realized that protecting myself wasn't selfish. That fighting back wasn't cruel. That standing up for my own dignity and rights wasn't a betrayal of motherhood, but an affirmation of my own worth as a human being. The relationship with Jeffrey is over. Completely over. We haven't spoken since the trial, and I've made peace with that. Because the son I thought I had, the son I raised, he doesn't exist. He was either never real or he was corrupted by Amanda's influence. Either way, the person who tried to steal my home and leave me to die in a studio apartment is not someone I want in my life. Blood relative or not. Choosing my own well-being over that relationship was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but also one of the most important. The real lesson here is about vigilance and documentation, and trusting your instincts when something feels wrong. Elder financial abuse is epidemic. It's everywhere. It's happening to someone right now. The perpetrators are often family members who feel entitled to their parents' assets, who see their elderly relatives as obstacles or inconveniences, who rationalize theft as they're going to die soon anyway, or we deserve this after everything we've put up with. Victims often don't fight back because they're ashamed, because they don't want to believe their children are capable of this, because the legal system is intimidating, or because they've been isolated and convinced they're incompetent. I almost fell into that trap, almost accepted my fate. Only luck and good timing, and one conversation with Margaret about her lawyer, saved me. I'm 76 years old now, still living in my house, still managing my own affairs, still completely independent. I have a new will that leaves everything to charity, not a penny to Jeffrey, and I've made sure he knows it. Made sure he understands that his greed and cruelty cost him not just our relationship, but any inheritance he was counting on. I sleep well at night knowing that the house he tried to steal, the equity he tried to pocket, the life he tried to control, none of it will ever be his. That's not revenge. That's justice. That's protecting future victims. That's making sure his behavior has real consequences. When I opened that attorney's file on moving day, when I called Robert Chun and said it's time, I wasn't just fighting for my house. I was fighting for my dignity, my autonomy, my right to live out my remaining years on my own terms in the home I loved. And I won. Not because I was lucky, but because I was smart enough to document everything, brave enough to fight back, and angry enough to see it through. If that makes me a difficult old woman, if that makes me ungrateful or vindictive in some people's eyes, I don't care. Because I'd rather be difficult and free than compliant and trapped. The smile on Amanda's face when she told me I'd be dying in a studio apartment. That smile was the last time she underestimated me. The last time she thought being old meant being stupid. The last time she confused vulnerability with weakness. I hope she remembers that smile. Remembers the moment she revealed her true nature. Remembers the moment she made the fatal mistake of thinking I was defeated when I was actually just getting started. If you found value in this story, if it's opened your eyes to the realities of elder financial abuse, if it's inspired you to check on your own elderly loved ones or protect yourself if you're getting older, if it's reminded you that age doesn't equal helplessness and that fighting back is always an option, please subscribe to this channel right now and hit that like button. I'll be sharing more stories like this, more lessons about protecting yourself, standing up for your rights, and refusing to be a victim no matter how old you are, or how powerful your adversaries seem. I need your support to reach more people, to warn more families, to empower more elderly individuals who think they're trapped. So subscribe, share this video, help me build a community of people who believe that dignity and autonomy don't have an expiration date. Now I want to hear from you. If you discovered that your own child or a family member was trying to financially exploit you or an elderly loved one, would you have the courage to fight back, even if it meant destroying that relationship forever? Or would you stay silent to keep the peace? Comment below and tell me your honest answer. Tell me if you've experienced something similar. Tell me if this story changed how you think about family dynamics and elder care. Because your stories matter. Your experiences matter. And together, we can shine a light on these situations that happen in the shadows and help protect the vulnerable from the people who should be protecting them. Thank you for watching, dear ones. Thank you for caring. And remember, being old doesn't mean being powerless. And standing up for yourself is never wrong. Until next time.